Ethan Blackwood, a Bitcoin billionaire, goes to the theater with his vibrant new girlfriend, Lila Harper, and unexpectedly finds his ex, Sarah Donovan, working at the concession stand, 6 months pregnant. He never imagined that. How far would you go to fix a mistake from the past and build a future you never imagined? Find out how an unexpected choice can change everything. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. Ethan stepped out of the sleek, black car, the engine purring softly as it idled in front of the luxurious theater in New York City. The evening air was crisp, and a light breeze danced through the bustling streets, carrying the sounds of laughter and distant music. He adjusted his tailored suit, the fabric hugging his athletic frame perfectly. His heart raced with the thrill of the night ahead, and beside him stood Lila, a vibrant woman in her late 20s, exuding an infectious energy that seemed to light up the world around her. Her long, dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her emerald green dress clung to her figure, accentuating her curves in a way that made Ethan's breath catch. As they stood on the sidewalk, the bright lights of the marquee casting a warm glow, Ethan leaned in and kissed Lila, their lips gently brushing against each other in a moment filled with promise. The kiss lingered just long enough to ignite the excitement that thrummed between them, a shared anticipation of what their evening held. He could feel the warmth of her skin, the soft scent of her perfume, a delicate mix of jasmine and vanilla, invading his senses, and for a moment, all thoughts of the past faded away. Hand in hand, they made their way up the grand staircase, passing groups of elegantly dressed patrons whose laughter and chatter created a symphony of excitement. The theater itself was a masterpiece, with its opulent decor and plush red velvet seats. Ethan felt a sense of pride wash over him as he glanced at Lila, who was looking around with wide-eyed wonder, her enthusiasm infectious. He had worked hard to achieve this level of success, and sharing it with someone like Lila made it all the more meaningful. Once inside, they found their seats in the middle of the grand auditorium, an ideal spot to immerse themselves in the performance. As the lights dimmed, Ethan couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline, not just from the anticipation of the show, but from the swirling memories that loomed in the corners of his mind. He settled into his seat, glancing at Lila, who was already absorbed in the program, her eyes sparkling with excitement. But as the curtain rose and the orchestra began to play, Ethan's thoughts began to drift. He couldn't shake the image of Sarah, the woman who had once been the center of his world. Memories flooded back with an intensity that surprised him. The laughter they shared, the dreams they had crafted together, and the bittersweet farewell that had come when his career took off. Sarah had been his first love, the one who had ignited a fire in him that had burned brightly before he'd plunged into the chaotic world of cryptocurrency and wealth. Ethan fought against the nostalgia that threatened to engulf him. He had chosen to move on, to embrace the life he had built with Lila, who represented everything he wanted now: vibrance, ambition, and a love that felt exhilaratingly fresh. Yet, as the actors graced the stage, he felt a pang deep within his chest, an ache for the life he had left behind. He tried to focus on Lila. She was laughing at the antics of the characters on stage, her laughter bright and genuine, and he couldn't help but smile at her joy. But in the back of his mind, Sarah's face lingered, a haunting reminder of the choices he had made. The more he tried to suppress those memories, the more they clawed their way to the surface, demanding acknowledgement. As the play unfolded, Ethan found himself increasingly distracted. The dialogue became a blur, the actors' movements mere shadows against the backdrop of his racing thoughts. He remembered the day he had left Sarah, the look of disbelief on her face as he told her he needed to pursue his dreams. He had convinced himself it was for the best, that they were too young to know what they wanted in life. But now, with Lila beside him, he couldn't help but wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. The storyline on stage was a tale of love and loss, a poignant reminder of the fragility of relationships. The characters navigated their own complexities and secrets, and Ethan felt an unsettling connection to their plight. As the narrative unfolded, he was struck by the realization that love was not simply about the present. It was also about the past, the choices that shaped who they had become. As the final act approached, the lights began to dim further, casting a soft glow across the auditorium. Ethan's heart raced, not just from the emotional climax of the performance, but from the gnawing sense that something was about to disrupt the carefully constructed world he had built. It was an unshakable feeling, like a storm brewing on the horizon, dark and ominous. He shifted in his seat, trying to dismiss the thought, but it clung to him like a shadow. The theater was a sanctuary, a place where he could lose himself in the art and the company of the woman beside him. Yet, the weight of his past pressed down on him, reminding him that the decisions he had made were not easily forgotten. The actors took their bows, and the audience erupted into applause, but Ethan's hands remained clenched in his lap. Lila turned to him, her eyes bright with excitement as she reveled in the applause, but Ethan felt a growing sense of dread. The show had been magnificent, yet he could not shake the feeling that his night was far from over. As the lights came up, revealing the ornate theater once more, Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. He glanced around, taking in the faces of the crowd, each one a stranger to him, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was about to disrupt this moment. He felt as if he were standing on the precipice of a cliff, teetering between the past he had left behind and the future he was trying to embrace. In that instant, a sense of foreboding washed over him. He didn't know how or why, but he felt the threads of his life beginning to intertwine in ways he had never anticipated. The night held secrets, and as he sat there, surrounded by the laughter and joy of others, he knew that the past had not yet finished revealing itself. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Ethan was on the brink of a revelation that would forever alter the course of his life and the lives of those he cared about. Ethan stepped into the bustling lobby of the theater, the vibrant energy of the crowd momentarily distracting him from the weight that had suddenly settled on his shoulders. The intermission had brought a welcome pause, yet the flickering excitement of the performance was overshadowed by an unexpected sense of foreboding that clung to him like a shadow. Lila, with her infectious smile and effervescent charm, looked up at him, her eyes sparkling with anticipation for the second act. Yet, as they moved deeper into the throng, Ethan felt a strange disconnection from the moment, as if he were a mere spectator in his own life. The scent of caramel and popcorn wafted through the air, mingling with the soft murmur of conversations around him. They made their way to the candy stand, where a colorful array of sweets beckoned to eager patrons. But Ethan's gaze was suddenly arrested by a figure behind the counter. Time seemed to slow as his heart skipped a beat. There, amid the bright lights and playful laughter, stood Sarah. The woman from his past, once a vibrant part of his life, now appeared transformed, glowing with an unmistakable radiance that was both beautiful and unsettling. She was unmistakably pregnant, her rounded belly subtly accentuating her delicate features. Ethan felt a jolt of recognition, a mix of shock and sorrow flooding through him. Memories rushed back, long-lost moments filled with laughter, love, and the bitter taste of regret. He had not seen her in years, and yet here she was, an emblem of a past he had tried to bury beneath the weight of his success. The sight of her stirred something deep within him, an unresolved ache that he thought he had long since quelled. Lila, sensing the abrupt shift in Ethan's demeanor, turned to him with a quizzical expression. Her brow furrowed slightly, a delicate line forming across her forehead as she followed his gaze. Ethan, caught in the whirlwind of emotions, felt a surge of panic rise within him. How could he explain this unexpected encounter? He brushed the thoughts aside, a feeble attempt to shield Lila from the storm brewing inside him. He forced a smile, though it felt strained and hollow, as he tried to redirect his focus back to her. But the connection between Ethan and Sarah was palpable, an invisible thread that seemed to pull at the very fabric of his being. Their eyes locked for a moment, and in that fleeting exchange, a universe of unspoken words passed between them. Sarah's expression was a mixture of surprise and something else, perhaps apprehension. She looked away quickly, as if the weight of their shared history had become too much to bear in such an open, public space. Ethan felt an urge to step closer, to bridge the distance that had grown between them, but a voice inside him held him back. He was here with Lila, a woman who had become a significant part of his life, and he could not betray that trust so easily. Yet, the thoughts of the past pressed against him, relentless and demanding. What had happened? How had they arrived at this moment? The questions echoed in his mind, amplifying the confusion that swirled around him. As the moment stretched, the atmosphere around them seemed to thicken with unspoken tension. Ethan turned his attention back to Lila, who was watching him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. He could sense her questioning gaze, the way her lips pressed together as if she were searching for the right words. Yet, in that instant, he was not ready to share the truth. The reality of his past that had come rushing back to the surface, demanding to be acknowledged. He needed time to process, to understand what this encounter meant for him before he could lay it bare before Lila. Ethan took a deep breath, shaking off the waves of nostalgia and focusing on Lila's presence, her vibrant energy contrasting sharply with the haunting memories of Sarah. He offered her a reassuring smile, though it felt fragile. She returned his gesture, but the concern in her eyes remained. The moment felt suspended, a fragile balance between the past and the present, and he struggled to maintain his footing. As the intermission drew to a close, the theater lights flickered, signaling the audience to return to their seats. But Ethan lingered for a heartbeat longer, casting one final glance at Sarah, who was now engaged with another customer. The sight of her, so close yet so distant, pulled at his heartstrings. He felt the weight of the moment, the realization that he was now a part of a narrative that had taken unexpected turns, intertwining three lives in ways he could hardly comprehend. With a heavy heart, he turned away and walked back towards Lila, who was already making her way toward the theater entrance. The brief encounter had left him shaken, and as they settled back into their seats, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his past was not finished with him yet. The lights dimmed once more, plunging them into darkness, but the flickers of uncertainty danced in his mind, refusing to fade away. The second act began, but Ethan found it difficult to concentrate on the unfolding story on stage. His thoughts were consumed by Sarah, the way she had looked, the unspoken emotions that had passed between them. He glanced over at Lila, who was absorbed in the performance, her joy evident in her expressions. It pained him to think that she was blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing within him. He had chosen this life with her, yet the ghost of his past loomed large, casting a shadow over their shared moments. As the play reached a crescendo, Ethan's mind wandered back to the implications of Sarah's pregnancy. The reality of it settled heavily on his chest. He was going to be a father. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. How had they reached this point? The years apart felt like a chasm he was now forced to confront. Would Sarah want him involved? Would he want to be involved? The questions spiraled, overwhelming him with their weight. When the curtain finally fell, the applause erupted around them, but Ethan remained seated, his mind racing. Lila turned to him, her excitement palpable as she shared her thoughts on the performance, but he barely registered her words. The walls of the theater, once a sanctuary, now felt confining, and he longed for the fresh air outside, where the reality of the world awaited him. As they exited into the cool night, the city lights twinkled like stars against the backdrop of the dark sky. Lila slipped her hand into his, her warmth grounding him momentarily. But even her touch felt distant as he struggled to reconcile the life he had built with Lila and the unexpected reality of Sarah's return. He had to confront the truth. Who was he now, and what did he truly want? They walked along the bustling street, the sounds of laughter and music swirling around them, but Ethan's mind was consumed by the unresolved tension of the evening. He needed clarity, an understanding of what this all meant for him. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He could no longer avoid the past. The threads of his life were intertwining in ways he had never anticipated, and he would have to face the music, no matter how painful it might be. The theater buzzed with the afterglow of the performance, the air thick with the mingling scents of popcorn, chocolate, and perfume. Ethan sat beside Lila, the vibrant woman who had captured his attention and affections in the whirlwind of his newfound wealth and fame. Yet, as the crowd began to disperse, Ethan felt an unsettling weight settle in his chest, a dissonance that began to overshadow the joy of the evening. The echoes of laughter and applause faded into a distant hum as his mind spiraled back to the moment he had locked eyes with Sarah at the candy stand. Lila, with her effortless charisma and radiant smile, turned to him, her brow furrowed in concern. Ethan's heart raced, not because of the applause still resonating in the theater, but due to the tempest of emotions that Sarah had unleashed within him. He attempted to engage with Lila, to immerse himself in the warmth of her presence, but every word felt hollow. His mind wandered, replaying the brief encounter with Sarah, the way her eyes had glimmered with something unspoken, something complicated. The couple stepped out into the cool evening air, the city lights twinkling like stars against the dark sky. Lila linked her arm through Ethan's, leaning her head against his shoulder, seeking comfort and connection. Ethan felt a pang of guilt wash over him. He should be savoring this moment with Lila, the woman who had filled his life with laughter and light. And yet, as they walked together, the shadows of the past loomed large in his thoughts. Each step felt heavier, an anchor pulling him deeper into a swirl of confusion. Lila noticed his distraction, her intuition finely tuned to the subtleties of his demeanor. She paused, looking up at him, her eyes searching for answers that he struggled to articulate. The tension between them crackled in the air, palpable and electric. Ethan felt the pressure of her gaze, a soft challenge that urged him to confront the unspoken words lingering between them. He wanted to reassure her, to brush off the distraction that consumed him, but the weight of his past hung like a storm cloud overhead, eclipsing the bright future he had envisioned with her. As they strolled towards a nearby cafe, Lila's voice, usually a soothing balm, now felt like a distant echo. Ethan's thoughts drifted back to Sarah, the way she had looked, the unyielding truth of her pregnancy, and the lingering connection they had shared. He wrestled with the tumult of emotions, guilt, regret, longing, as he tried to focus on Lila. She deserved his full attention, but the ghost of his past was relentless, tugging at the corners of his mind. Ethan's heart raced as they settled into a cozy corner of the cafe, the ambience comforting yet stifling. Lila chatted animatedly about the show, her enthusiasm a stark contrast to the turmoil within him. He forced himself to nod and smile, but the sincerity of his responses felt like a facade. The warmth of the cafe enveloped him, yet his thoughts were a chilling reminder of the unresolved feelings he held for Sarah. As Lila sipped her coffee, Ethan's mind drifted further back, recalling the moments they had shared, the laughter, the dreams, the intimacy that had once defined his relationship with Sarah. It was difficult to reconcile those memories with the reality of the situation now. He felt torn between two worlds, the life he had built with Lila and the haunting remnants of a love that had once consumed him. The thought of being a father, of stepping into a role he never anticipated, sent shivers down his spine. Lila's voice snapped him back to reality, her tone shifting as she sensed the distance between them. She leaned in closer, her eyes searching his, as if trying to penetrate the fog of his thoughts. There was a defensiveness in her posture, a subtle acknowledgement that she felt threatened by the invisible presence of Sarah in their lives. Ethan felt a pang of regret, knowing that this was not the evening he had envisioned, one filled with laughter and joy. It had morphed into an emotional battlefield. Suddenly, the desire to confide in Lila surged within him. He wanted to shed the weight of his past, to share the truth of his feelings, no matter how complicated they were. As he began to speak, the words flowed hesitantly at first, like a dam breaking under pressure. He recounted the history he shared with Sarah, the love that had once been all-consuming, the dreams they had woven together before life had pulled them apart. He spoke of the encounter at the theater, the surprise of seeing her pregnant, and the rush of emotions that had flooded back in an instant. Lila listened, her expression shifting from concern to defensiveness. Ethan could see the tension coil within her, a storm brewing behind her eyes. The vulnerability that had initially drawn them together now felt like a chasm, threatening to swallow them whole. He watched as her body language shifted, her arms crossing defensively. The warmth between them began to dissipate, replaced by a chill that settled like a fog in the air. As he spoke, Ethan felt the need to reassure her, to validate their relationship. He wanted to express that his past with Sarah did not diminish what he felt for Lila. Yet the words tangled in his throat, caught in the web of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. Lila's insecurities clawed at the edges of her demeanor, and Ethan could sense the fear of losing him to the ghosts of his past. The conversation turned into a tug-of-war, with Ethan desperately trying to bridge the chasm that had formed between them. Lila's defensiveness morphed into frustration, and he could see her struggling to reconcile her feelings of love and insecurity. It was as if the very foundation of their relationship was being tested, and Ethan felt the ground beneath him shift. He realized that he had to make a choice, to confront the reality of his situation. The weight of Sarah's pregnancy pressed heavily on his conscience, demanding attention and resolution. He knew he had to reach out to her, to understand the complexities of their situation and what being a father truly meant. The thought of stepping back into Sarah's life filled him with both dread and a sense of responsibility. As the evening wore on, Ethan's heart raced with the enormity of the decision ahead. He could sense Lila's disappointment, her frustration simmering just beneath the surface. He understood that she was scared of losing him, of being relegated to the sidelines of his life as the past clawed its way back into his present. And yet, he also felt the undeniable pull of his obligation to Sarah and the child she carried. He longed to assure Lila that his feelings for her were genuine, that their moments together mattered. But in that moment, clarity struck him like a lightning bolt. He had to be honest with himself and with her. He would reach out to Sarah, not just to clarify his role, but to confront the feelings that had been buried for far too long. There was a part of him that needed closure, a resolution that could not be achieved without facing the past head-on. As they finished their coffees, Ethan could sense the tension lingering in the air, thick and unyielding. He looked at Lila, her eyes reflecting a mixture of love and fear. He knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but it was a journey he had to undertake. With a heavy heart, he resolved to take the first step towards understanding the complex tapestry of love, responsibility, and the future that lay before him. The night was far from over, but his mind was already racing towards the decisions he would have to face in the days to come. Ethan sat across from Sarah in a quaint cafe, their usual haunt from years ago, now transformed by the weight of unspoken words and unresolved emotions. The ambience was warm, filled with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of conversations around them. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting a gentle glow on Sarah's face, emphasizing the delicate contours of her features. Yet, despite the cozy surroundings, an undeniable tension hung in the air, a palpable reminder of the complex history they shared. His heart raced as he studied her, taking in the way her hands rested protectively on her belly, a physical manifestation of the life they had inadvertently created together. Memories of their past flooded his mind. Dancing under the stars, whispered promises, laughter echoing through the streets of New York. But those memories now felt distant, overshadowed by the reality of the present. Ethan couldn't help but feel a mixture of nostalgia and regret. He had always envisioned a future with her, yet here they were, navigating a maze of emotions that left him feeling lost. Sarah's eyes, usually so bright and full of life, now carried a depth of sorrow. She looked away, tracing the rim of her coffee cup with her finger, as if seeking comfort in the mundane object. Ethan felt a pang of longing to reach out, to bridge the chasm that had grown between them, but he was unsure how to begin. The silence stretched on, heavy and uncomfortable, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, Sarah broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. She spoke of her decision to keep the pregnancy from him, her fear of how he would react still evident in her tone. Ethan listened intently, his heart aching at the thought of her struggling alone. He wanted to reach across the table, to reassure her that they could have faced this together, but the words felt stuck in his throat. The weight of her revelation hung over them, transforming their once carefree conversations into a dialogue laden with responsibility and urgency. As she detailed her struggles, working multiple jobs, balancing her health and finances, Ethan felt a rush of emotions. He admired her strength, the way she had fought to support herself and the child they had created. It was a sacrifice that he had not fully appreciated until now, and it deepened the feelings he had long buried beneath layers of ambition and success. The image of Sarah, alone yet fiercely determined, ignited a sense of protectiveness within him, one that he had thought was long gone. He wanted to offer her everything, to provide for her and the child in ways that she had never imagined. But he also sensed that this was a delicate moment, one that required sensitivity and thoughtfulness. Sarah had made it clear that she was capable of handling her situation, and Ethan grappled with the urge to step in without overstepping her boundaries. This was not just about them anymore. It was about the new life they had unwittingly brought into the world. As they continued to converse, Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. He envisioned a future where they could co-parent, where they could navigate the challenges together as a unified front. He remembered the warmth of their relationship, the easy way they had once intertwined their lives. But now, the complexities of their circumstances loomed large, and the question of their relationship hung in the balance. Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowed in contemplation. He knew he had to address the elephant in the room. He wanted to help Sarah, to be there for her and their child, but he also needed to understand what that would mean for their relationship. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts, aware that this conversation could change everything. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "I want to support you. I can't just stand by and watch you struggle. You don't have to do this alone." He paused, searching her eyes for a reaction. "I want to help." A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but she quickly masked it with a look of resolve. She shook her head gently, her expression a mix of gratitude and determination. "Ethan, I appreciate that, but this is my responsibility now. I need to focus on what's best for the baby." Her voice was firm, yet there was a softness that hinted at her vulnerability. Ethan felt a pang of disappointment, but respected her stance. He understood that she was trying to assert her independence, to show that she could handle this. Yet, the idea of being sidelined from the life of his child was unbearable. He could not dismiss the instinct to be involved, to step up in ways that felt right for both of them. As the conversation continued, Ethan realized that they were navigating a complex web of emotions: fear, hope, love, and uncertainty. Each revelation brought them closer to understanding the reality of their situation, yet it also highlighted the distance that had grown between them. They were no longer the carefree couple they had once been. Life had thrust them into roles they had never anticipated. The cafe buzzed around them, oblivious to the transformative conversation unfolding at their table. Ethan's thoughts drifted, contemplating the future. Would they find a way to reconcile their past with the new reality? He thought of Lila, the vibrant woman who had recently captured his heart, and felt a pang of guilt. Their relationship was blossoming, yet here he was, entangled in a past he thought he had moved on from. The guilt weighed heavily on him, a reminder of the delicate balance he was trying to maintain. As they finished their coffees, the conversation began to shift towards logistics, the practicalities of co-parenting, where they would live, how they would communicate. Ethan was struck by how mature and grounded Sarah had become. The girl he had once known was now a woman faced with the complexities of motherhood, and despite the circumstances, he felt a surge of pride for her determination. But underlying the discussions was an unspoken tension, a longing that neither of them dared to vocalize. Ethan could see it in Sarah's eyes, the flicker of hope mixed with fear. He, too, felt it, a desire to reconnect, to explore whether the love they once shared could be rekindled amidst the chaos of their lives. Yet, he understood that this was not the time for such thoughts. They had to prioritize the child first, to ensure that any decisions they made were rooted in what was best for the new life they had created together. As they stood to leave, the weight of their conversation lingered in the air. Ethan felt a mix of hope and uncertainty, knowing that their journey was just beginning. He wanted to believe that they could navigate the complexities of their situation together, but he also understood the challenges ahead. With a lingering touch of her hand, he felt a connection that transcended their past, a promise of support and understanding for the future. As he walked away from the cafe, Ethan's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He had so many questions, so many emotions battling for attention. What did this mean for his relationship with Lila? How would he balance the two worlds that were now intertwined? The road ahead seemed daunting, filled with unexpected twists and turns, yet amidst the uncertainty, a flicker of hope ignited within him. A hope that perhaps they could forge a new path together, one step at a time. Ethan returned home, the door clicking shut behind him with an unsettling finality. The weight of the evening pressed heavily on his shoulders, a palpable tension that made the air feel thick and suffocating. He tossed his keys onto the marble countertop in the sleek kitchen, the sound echoing in the otherwise quiet space. Lila was perched on one of the plush bar stools, her fingers nervously tapping against the polished surface as she watched him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. The soft glow of the pendant lights created an intimate atmosphere, but Ethan felt anything but at ease. His mind was a chaotic whirlwind of emotions, spinning with the memories of Sarah's radiant smile and the undeniable truth that lingered between them. He could still see her standing behind that candy counter, her bump subtly pronounced, a symbol of their shared past and the new life they were unknowingly creating together. The image haunted him, gnawing at his conscience, sparking a tempest of conflicting feelings that left him feeling disoriented. Lila spoke, her voice gentle yet firm, urging him to let go of the shadows of his past. She was beautiful, vibrant, and filled with dreams of a future they could build together. Yet, as she laid out her hopes and aspirations, Ethan felt a chasm opening within him. He was torn between the life he had begun to construct with Lila, the late-night conversations, the shared laughter, and the plans for a future that seemed bright, and the unexpected return of Sarah, who had become a ghost from his past, now flesh and blood, standing before him with a future of her own. Ethan's heart raced as he attempted to articulate his inner turmoil, but the words evaded him like wisps of smoke. Lila's eyes searched his, seeking answers that he was not ready to provide. He felt her disappointment grow, an unspoken accusation hanging in the air. He wanted to assure her that his feelings for her were genuine, that she was the one he had chosen to be with. Yet how could he ignore the bond he shared with Sarah? It was a connection steeped in history, love, and now, an impending responsibility that sent shivers down his spine. Days turned into weeks as Ethan found himself caught in a web of emotions. He spent more time with Sarah, their meetings becoming a refuge for his conflicted heart. Each encounter was charged with unspoken words, lingering glances, and a palpable energy that reignited the spark they once shared. They would sit in cozy cafes, their conversations flowing effortlessly, laughter punctuating the air as they reminisced about shared memories. There was a sense of comfort in her presence that he had not realized he missed so dearly. Ethan observed the way Sarah's laughter danced in her eyes, how her smile could light up the dimmest of rooms. He found himself captivated by her resilience, the way she navigated the challenges of impending motherhood with grace and determination. She spoke of her plans, her dreams for the child that would soon arrive, and he couldn't help but admire the strength she exuded. In those moments, he felt the walls he had built around his heart begin to crumble, the undeniable pull towards her growing stronger with each passing day. Yet, lurking beneath the surface was an ever-present guilt. He was aware of the toll this was taking on Lila. She had become increasingly distant, her laughter less frequent, her smiles more strained. He could sense her heartache, the way she would glance at him, searching for reassurance that he was still hers. But how could he offer her the certainty she craved while his heart was divided? The burden of his indecision weighed heavily on him, a constant reminder of the choices he had to make. Lila's attempts to bridge the emotional gap became more pronounced. She would initiate conversations about their future, subtly probing for clarity on his feelings. Ethan would often respond with vague reassurances, promising that they would figure it out together, all the while knowing that his heart was wandering back to Sarah. The more time he spent with his ex, the more he felt the old affection rekindle, morphing into something deeper, more profound. It was a feeling he had long thought extinguished, yet here it was, vibrant and full of life. One evening, as they strolled through Central Park, the vibrant colors of autumn leaves swirling around them, Ethan felt a familiar warmth envelop him. He turned to look at Lila, who was animatedly talking about a new project at work, her passion evident in her every word. In that moment, he felt a pang of longing for the life they had begun to create together. But as he listened, the thought of Sarah and the child they might share loomed over him like a storm cloud, threatening to overshadow everything. Ethan found himself retreating into his thoughts, contemplating the implications of his choices. He could envision a future with Lila, one filled with stability, love, and partnership. Yet, the thought of abandoning Sarah and the child felt like a betrayal of everything he once held dear. The weight of his indecision was suffocating, leaving him restless and unable to focus on the present. With each passing day, the distance between him and Lila grew. She could sense it, and despair began to creep into her demeanor. Lila was no fool. She understood that something had changed within him. The glances he would steal toward his phone, the moments of silence that stretched too long, they all spoke of a heart divided. It was only a matter of time before she confronted him, demanding clarity, a reckoning of sorts. The confrontation came one late evening. Lila, her eyes filled with a mixture of desperation and determination, stood before him, demanding to know where his heart truly lay. The vulnerability in her voice cut through him, and he felt the familiar pang of guilt wash over him. In that moment, Ethan understood the gravity of his situation. He had to make a choice, and every option before him was fraught with emotion and consequence. As he looked into Lila's eyes, he realized that no matter how much he cared for her, the foundation of their relationship was built on uncertainty. He had to confront the truth of his feelings for Sarah, for the child that was on the way, and for the life he had once envisioned with her. The weight of the decision loomed large, and he found himself standing at a crossroads, the paths ahead obscured by the fog of his emotions. Ethan's heart raced as he weighed his options, knowing that whatever decision he made would irrevocably change the course of their lives. The future he had been building with Lila felt fragile and precarious, teetering on the edge of a precipice. But the pull of his past, embodied by Sarah, was undeniable. He had to reconcile the love he felt for both women, the connections that bound him to each of them, and the responsibilities that awaited him with the impending arrival of a child. In the stillness of that moment, as the weight of his choices loomed large, Ethan felt a sense of clarity begin to emerge. He realized that the time for indecision was over. Whatever path he chose, it was crucial to confront the truth of his heart and embrace the consequences of his actions, no matter how painful they might be. As Ethan stood in the softly lit cafe, a sense of inevitability enveloped him. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of pastries, creating an inviting atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the tumult within him. Lila had just left, her heart shattered by the revelations he had shared. The weight of his confession still hung heavily in the air. He had laid bare his feelings for Sarah, the woman who had once consumed his every thought. He had seen the pain in Lila's eyes, a reflection of the love they had built and the future they had imagined together. But now, with Sarah back in his life, those dreams felt uncertain. Ethan's gaze drifted to the window, where the bustling streets of New York City carried on with their relentless pace. Outside, the world was vibrant and alive, but within him, a storm raged. He thought of Sarah, the way her laughter used to fill his heart with warmth, the spark that ignited their relationship years ago. He remembered the feeling of holding her close, the comfort of being wrapped in her presence. But time had changed them both. The innocence of their love had been replaced by the complexities of adulthood, and now she was pregnant, carrying the weight of their past. The realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. He was going to be a father. As he stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, Ethan's mind replayed the moments he had shared with Sarah over the past few weeks. Their first coffee meeting had been charged with unspoken words, a palpable tension that lingered long after they had parted ways. He had watched her navigate her life, a mix of determination and vulnerability. She was not the same girl he had fallen for. She had grown stronger, more resilient, but the tenderness in her eyes remained. Each time he saw her, he felt the old feelings resurfacing, battling against the new life he had started to build with Lila. He wondered if he had made a mistake in opening up to Lila. She had been so supportive and loving, always understanding his need to reconcile with his past. Yet, as he revealed his heart to her, he had seen the flicker of fear and hurt in her expression. It was a look he never wanted to witness, but the truth had escaped him. He could no longer pretend that his past didn't matter. He had tried to compartmentalize his feelings, but the moment he saw Sarah in the theater, everything crashed down around him. Now, as he sat alone, Ethan contemplated his next steps. He could sense that the gravity of the situation was shifting. Lila had a job offer waiting for her in another city, a fresh start that would take her away from him. The thought of her leaving sent a pang of regret through him, as he realized just how much he would miss her. She had brought a lightness into his life, a sense of adventure and joy that he had desperately needed. But could he truly commit to her when his heart was still tethered to Sarah? This inner conflict weighed heavily on his conscience. He felt like a man caught between two worlds, each pulling him in a different direction. Sarah needed him, but Lila did too. In that moment of reflection, he realized that the decision he faced was not just about choosing between two women. It was about embracing the responsibilities of adulthood and the complexities of love. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the city, Ethan made his way back to his apartment. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting for him to make a choice. He needed to speak to Sarah one last time, to understand where they stood and what the future might hold. The following day, Ethan met Sarah at a park, a quiet space filled with the sounds of chirping birds and laughter from children. The sun filtered through the leaves, creating a dappled pattern on the grass. Sarah arrived, her hand resting gently on her belly, a subtle reminder of the life they had created together. As they sat on a bench, the air thick with unspoken words, Ethan could see the strength in her eyes, mixed with a vulnerability that tugged at his heart. She spoke of her family, how they had rallied around her during this unexpected chapter of her life. They had been a source of support, helping her navigate the challenges of pregnancy alone. As she shared her experiences, Ethan felt a swell of admiration for her resilience. She was not just the girl he had loved. She was a woman forging her own path, even in the face of uncertainty. But then came the moment that shifted everything. Sarah looked at him, her expression earnest, and revealed that she did not expect him to be involved if he didn't want to be. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Ethan's heart raced as he processed her statement. The thought of stepping back, of leaving her to face this alone, felt unbearable. He had been given a second chance to be part of her life, to be a father, and yet here was the opportunity to walk away. For a brief moment, Ethan was silent, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He thought of Lila, her kindness, her laughter, the life they had started to build. But then he thought of Sarah and the deep connection they shared, a bond that transcended time and circumstance. He could feel the pull of his heart, urging him to take a leap of faith. In that moment of clarity, he made a choice. He reached for Sarah's hand, the warmth of her skin grounding him in reality. He expressed his desire to be part of their lives, to support her and the child they had created. The look of surprise that crossed her face was quickly replaced by one of gratitude, and in that shared moment, they both understood the significance of his words. As they embraced, Ethan felt a rush of emotions, relief, hope, and a profound sense of love. The future was uncertain, but he knew that together, they could navigate the complexities ahead. Meanwhile, Lila was finding her own path, a fresh start waiting for her beyond the city. In that moment, Ethan recognized the bittersweet nature of their lives. Love was not a simple equation. It was a tapestry woven from moments of joy and sorrow, choice and consequence. As they stood together in the park, surrounded by the vibrant colors of autumn, Ethan felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had embraced the past, acknowledged his feelings, and chosen a future filled with possibility. It was time to move forward, not just for himself, but for Sarah and the child they would welcome into the world. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, and in that shared journey, he found hope for a new beginning.